The fields and streets of this land are a battleground.
At a stroke of a pen, they can destroy a man's life.
For a very British conflict.
How they could tell it wasn't the right shade of pink is beyond me.
That's an abomination, that is.
On one side, maverick individuals who've broken the rules to create their dream homes.
This is an underground aquarium. We're hoping to have a couple of sharks in there.
On the other, the planners whose job it is to uphold those rules.
The committee don't like being made fools of.
It's completely beyond my comprehension.
Over my dead body, that building would be coming down.
It's an epic struggle pitching David against Goliath.
I was damned if I did, and I was damned if I didn't.
They're trying to destroy my house. I don't know what's up with them.
Do I secretly like a battle? Yes, I'm afraid I do.
Win, and they get to keep their home.
All those in favour, please show.
Lose, and their dreams will be turned, quite literally, to rubble.
The house must be demolished. If the council think they're going to take it down, they've got another thing coming.
These defiant homeowners are locked in conflict with the planning authorities. A crucial year lies ahead as they face the councils and even court in the final stages of their appeals.
If the councils are referring to such and such a year, I could dig it straight out.
In Surrey, farmer Robert Fiddler built a castle with his own bare hands and hid it behind hay bales.
It seemed pretty crazy at the time, but there was no other alternative.
Norfolk pensioner Rodney is nearing the end of a one-man war to keep the bulldozers away from his retirement home.
I'm not just going to stand here and let them touch my own.
And in Oxford, one man's artistic loft conversion has changed the skyline forever.
Imagine living in a house with that lot of rubbish stuck on your roof.
First, the businessman with a vision so grand it caused uproar in leafy Bedfordshire.
I'm Syed Shah. I was born and bred in Luton and run a beauty clinic in Luton.
As a full-time owner of a busy Bedfordshire beauty establishment, part-time dreamer Syed Shah wanted a house which reflected his success. And he found it on the outskirts of the small French-sounding town of Barton-le-Clay.
In 2008, I bought a 5-bedroom bungalow with a view to extending it. It was rather small. It only had one small kitchen and a reception room.
Syed paid £750,000 for the bungalow, but the beauty salon owner saw the potential for a huge makeover, and after applying to the council, he got the go-ahead to extend. And his vision for a supersized executive family home was unleashed.
The vast property that I have, I've made some minor adjustments which were needed to make it aesthetically more pleasing.
Syed set to work converting the 5-bedroom bungalow in 2012. After 18 months, he created a 6,000 square foot, 7-bedroomed mansion. It was large enough for his wife and 4 children to move into one wing of the property, while work continued on the rest of the home.
This area was a flat roof. As I said, we were granted permission for a pitch roof, which is what we've done. The balconies, right. This is going to be an underground aquarium. We're hoping to have a couple of sharks in there. It's something my kids have always wanted, sharks. Compared to what it was and what it is now, in my humble opinion, I mean, I think I have done a nice job. This is the highlight of my life, building a home like this for my family and myself. And as I say, I've been through a lot of hard work to achieve this.
Sadly, Syed's achievements didn't include close enough attention to the planning permission he'd been granted. The extensions he'd built were much bigger than the approved plans, and unsurprisingly, they hadn't gone unnoticed.
Yes, there have been a couple of objections from other neighbours. They say there's 11 complaints. Don't know where the 11 complaints are. We've only got 7 houses on the road. Have they got nothing better to do?
This is no-nonsense planning official Nigel Young, and this is the greenbelt he has sworn to protect. Unfortunately for Syed, his house lies slap bang in the middle of it.
I can't know what was going on in Mr. Shah's mind. I mean, the facts are what was being built was not what had been granted permission. Mr. Shah should revert to the original planning permission.
The council visited the site, and what they found led them to ask themselves a very interesting question.
When does an extension become a new build?
Meet Jason Longhurst of Central Bedfordshire Council. He knows the answer.
I think it's when you step away, one, from your planning permission and what was consented upon. And when you look at this site, it is drastically different from what was originally there, what we've seen on the plans that we did permit.
The council, in fact, classed Syed's house as a completely new build, claiming it way exceeded the 45% increase he was permitted. They say by as much as a further 150%. News of Syed's house soon spread, creating a media frenzy in the Bedfordshire area. It even sparked a live local radio debate.
It's the big phone-in on BBC Three Counties Radio, talking about a 7-bedroom home in Barton-le-Clay with an inappropriate extension. That house is ugly, says Sue. I see this monstrosity from the A6 every time I drive from Bedford.
I think it looks really quite nice, really.
I've lived in Barton-le-Clay all my life. That's one of the reasons why I'm against this sort of thing happening. But he just seems to have got away with it. And I personally think that the local council should stop it. And why have planning in the first place?
Keen to put his house back in order, Syed contacted the council for advice.
I mean, I put my hands up. These are the extra items that I've added on my house. What would you like me to do? They said to me, send us retrospective planning permission, which is what I did.
Mr. Shah's retrospective applications were considered and were declined.
But Councillor Nigel wasn't finished.
An enforcement notice was issued by the council, and they have to be as a result of a refusal of planning permission or a breach of planning permission.
In August 2013, Syed was given 2 months to demolish the house, by now worth an estimated £2 million, at a potential further cost of over £100,000.
No, we can't demolish it because we don't have the funds to demolish it to start with. Second of all, we don't have a home to go to. This is our home. Having it demolished, where am I going to go? I know my rights. I don't think I've done anything wrong. We will be fighting it all the way.
With the law bearing down on Syed, in Surrey, an ingenious farmer has found a legal loophole which could save his grand creation.
We discovered that there was no law against hiding it. So my mind was going, how can I hide a house?
With such strict planning laws in the UK, it's little wonder only 10% of land has actually been developed. But that also means there'll always be savvy homeowners seeking creative ways to take on the system. Few have ever been quite so creative as one farmer from Surrey. 66-year-old Robert Fiddler lives with his wife Linda and son Harry on their farm near Redhill. 14 years ago, Robert had a dream of building his own home. But his vision wasn't just for any old two up, two down.
It was like a toss-up between whether you just throw something up and just say, well, we've got a house to live in now, or whether you fulfil your dream of trying to build something you can be proud of.
Robert wasn't going to go for any Scandinavian minimalist look, Brooklyn warehouse vibe, or even classic country cottage. No. As a proud Englishman, Robert decided to build a castle.
We wanted it to be green and recyclable. All the oak beams, everything is oak from our own trees. All the stone is second-hand, all the tiles are second-hand. I would find all sorts of materials from demolition yards, and we've got 200 brand new window units for £2 each. This is the dining hall. This beautiful dome came from Brighton. It was on an entrance to the old pier that fell in the sea. It was in quite a state, so the first thing I had to do was to learn how to repair it, so I went and did an evening class.
This is one impressive achievement. Robert's remarkable ingenuity and use of reclaimed materials meant that he was now the owner of this magnificent 1,700 square foot castle for just £50,000. But despite saving a fortune on building costs, there was one thing Robert couldn't get for love nor money: planning permission. And so, ever since Robert unveiled his masterpiece, the local council have been trying to demolish it.
This particular building is not lawful on that site. Honeycroft Farm is the longest running planning dispute case that this borough has ever encountered.
The story of how Robert came to build his bi-turreted castle comprising ornamental dome without planning permission began 15 years ago in much more modest fashion, when he tried to convert an existing outbuilding on the farm.
It was an old Victorian building. They asked us to put in a planning application, which we did, and then we just waited. And waited and waited.
While they were waiting for the council, Linda became pregnant with Harry. But by the time he was born, the council still hadn't managed to reply to the planning application. With a young family to house, Robert took things into his own hands.
I had nowhere else to live, so I inquired of a planning consultant, and he explained to me the 4-year rule.
Or in planning speak, Section 171B of the 1990 Town and Country Planning Act.
The 4-year rule was basically that if you've built something unlawful and it's not been noticed by the council, after a period of 4 years, no enforcement action could be taken.
We discovered that as long as the place has been there for 4 years, whether it was hidden or not was irrelevant. So my mind was going, how can I hide a house?
As Robert was no magician, his approach was less hey presto and more just hay. Several tons of hay, which Robert ingeniously used to hide his castle whilst he built it.
So when is a stack of straw not a stack of straw? When it's a house, I suppose. It seemed pretty crazy at the time, but there was no other alternative.
Robert couldn't risk blowing his cover by hiring in outside help, so with no formal training whatsoever, he had to design and build the whole thing himself.
I mean, obviously it was just all in my head, but as I thought about it, I did sketches more than plans. This one here was one of the first drawings I did, what the place would look like. This is from the front and this is from the back.
To build his fortified family home, resourceful Robert used 2 circular corn silos at each end of the building for the turrets. Then, before going any further, he constructed a dense wall of hay around them, so he could then build the main body of the house away from prying eyes. Robert had set himself an enormous task, but precious little time to do it.
Nobody else could be involved. I mean, we could hardly get the builders in. You know, we had to be very careful about who knew about it because it was our little secret, you know.
The castle-concealing farmer began his build in the autumn of 2000 and aimed to finish by the end of the following year. And to comply with the 4-year rule, he then had to live in it for 4 years. By which time, according to Farmer Robert's interpretation of the planning law, his family home would be safe as, well, houses or castles.
Are you clearing up for Daddy? The underfloor heating's in place as well.
Robert's ambitious plans were constantly evolving.
The staircase, originally I had this idea of doing a triangular piece of wood, but when I looked at it, I thought it looked so much nicer, being solid and full size, you know. Most of this fireplace was built like 3 o'clock in the morning. It used to take me a long time to do all these little fiddly patterns and things. That was supposed to be an eagle type of bird, and that was supposed to be a fish. That didn't end up looking anything like an eagle, and that don't look much like a fish, but there's a pattern in it. You can see how close we are to working in between the bales. This is the top of the big window, So we're nearly there.
Finally, in 2002, the build was completed.
How's it all looking now?
The house was finished, but the champagne was left on ice because the family's 4 years in hiding was only just beginning.
Well, from the inside, it was like any normal house.
Well, fancy finding you here.
But obviously, you were always wanting to see what it was going to look like on the outside. I mean, the only difference, I suppose, for me would have been like food shopping and bringing stuff in. Just had to look out to see if anybody was watching us and then just quickly going through the fourth door and long corridors.
The only tricky bit, really, was when Harry was at play school, the kids were told that they would be drawing a picture of their house. And so we were a bit worried that Harry would go back and draw a big picture of a stack of straw.
At last, in June 2006, it was time to reveal Castle Fiddler to the world.
You can just see the house, the bungalow, through the trees there. All they'd ever seen was like a big stack of straw, and then one day they come over and said, "We just had to come and see you." Suddenly we looked out the window and there's this castle.
You have it in your head what you think it's going to look like, and you've got the drawings and everything. But when you actually see it, especially when at night when we went out on the lawn for the first time with all the lights on in the house, that was something special.
But castle building in the Greenbelt is never straightforward. And it wasn't long before the local planners declared war on Robert's family fortress.
The council immediately put an enforcement order on it for it to be removed.
And so began a planning battle, which would last for the next 9 years.
I don't know what's up with them. Obviously they don't like me, but I've never done anything to hurt them.
Sometimes even the smallest planning fracas can escalate into a feud of epic proportions. Often these things do indeed come down to a matter of inches. Market Town Wisbeach on the Cambridgeshire-Norfolk border is the retirement oasis pensioners Rodney Wilson and Pam Wen chose when moving from nearby Enmouth almost a decade ago.
We lived in a house in Enmouth for 20 years.
20 years.
20 years. And the children were leaving home. We decided to downsize. So we bought this land, and that was going to be our retirement home.
The couple first met in their 20s, having come from totally different backgrounds. Rodney was brought up as a gypsy, whereas Pam grew up in a traditional home, and she wants to retire in one.
When you're in a house with double glazing, you do not hear anything. And that is very hard when you are being a gypsy. So to get the balance, we decided on half as the house and half as the caravan.
We had it made exactly how we wanted it, and it was made just for us.
Rodney's ingenious hybrid solution was to take 2 static caravans and fix them together, sticking a pitched roof on the top. It looked just like a traditional bungalow, and within a matter of weeks, the couple moved in. His very own caravan-based mashup was complete, but one thing Rodney hadn't bothered with was planning permission, because he knew gypsies were allowed special exemptions when stationing caravans in the countryside. But down at Council HQ, the powers that be disagreed.
Council said I didn't qualify for being a gypsy. They've even made comments that I'm not a gypsy. But,
So-called?
So-called, that's what they call me, a so-called gypsy.
So-called gypsy.
My father was a gypsy, my mother was a gypsy, my grandparents on both sides, my great-grandparents on both sides, and I had to get a family tree.
After 5 years, and with his gypsy roots finally verified, Rodney got permission for a static caravan on the land. But the party was over before it had even begun. Norfolk's town planners said you can't have a static caravan with decking, and a conservatory, and bricks. The jury was out on the wheels, though. All of which begs the question, when is a caravan not a caravan? A man with the answer is local dealership owner Michael McDonnell. Michael knows caravans.
There are variations around the country with local authorities giving different interpretations as to what constitutes a caravan and what does not. This is definitely a caravan. Whether it's in two halves or joined together, it's still a caravan. It comes with wheels and it can be moved. And whether it's got a brick skirt around it or not, whether it's got a conservatory attached to it or not, it's still a caravan. It's blue outside. If we paint it pink, it's still a caravan.
But the council were adamant that whatever its colour, Rodney's home was definitely not a caravan, and in 2006 issued Rodney and Pam with a notice to demolish their dream home.
They've got one vision in their mind. Either you do what we tell you or you're off.
Rodney was so convinced they were wrong, he decided to challenge the council and appeal to the Planning Inspectorate, the independent government body that oversees all planning and enforcement appeals. They pointed to the Caravan Act of 1968, particularly the bit that says a caravan cannot exceed a specific height, length or width.
The Planning Inspectorate came out here, measured the home, and said it was 19 inches too wide.
The legal definition of a caravan is extremely strict, and there's no room for any manoeuvre in that. If it's slightly larger, you just have to conclude that it's not a caravan.
The council's enforcement notice to demolish was upheld.
If I interfere with them, I will get locked up, but I'm not just going to stand here and let them touch my home. I will have to defend my home in any way I can.
So Rodney and Pam have a serious planning problem, in complete contrast to a long-running case that's as bizarre as it is controversial, the tale of a shark in a roof in Oxford.
This is no longer just a house, it's a piece of sculpture.
That's an abomination, that is.
British planning laws are notoriously strict, but this doesn't stop some visionaries taking on the system. In Oxford, one man's eccentric rooftop feature remains controversial 30 years after it first appeared.
We have millions and millions of visitors come every year to this city. We've got one of the great universities of this world. Thatcher, Blair are educated here. The whole basis of government throughout the democratic world is built around the works of Hobbes and Locke, both are educated in this university. It's the centre of the universe. But you've always had in this city headline-grabbing fringe minorities. They're always up to something or other.
Meet Bill Heiner, proud owner of Oxford's Shark House. Since this sculpture was erected in 1986, it has attracted thousands of visitors from around the world. The unlikely inspiration was a squadron of American Air Force jets en route to Libya. No, really.
When I went to bed, 15th of April, 1986, I heard planes flying over Oxford. And then in the morning, the news broadcast had the headlines that the Americans had bombed Tripoli. And I thought, how terrible this is.
Bill's confusingly fish-based anti-war protest has taken on a life of its own.
This is no longer just a house, and it's not just a shark. It's a piece of sculpture. I didn't realize the consequences of this.
It all began back in 1986 when, with the help of two 20-ton cranes, the dream, having a 25-foot, 200-kilogram fiberglass shark inserted into Bill's home, came to fruition.
Yes! We did it! It's really there. It's real. Let the battle begin.
John Power was part of Oxford Council's planning committee in 1986.
Oxford's known as a city the dream inspires, and that certainly isn't one of the dream inspires. That's an ugly eyesore, and it was not given permission by the planning authority of this city.
And it wasn't long before the battle over whether the shark needed planning approval caught the attention of the media.
Now then, city planners in Oxford are poised to set their nets around what's turned out to be a rather fishy saga.
One question only comes to the lips. Why?
It's come across the Great Barrier Reef of the Oxford City Council now, but I think it's swimming over their heads.
If If we didn't put some kind of check on this, we'd have had all kinds of things going on roofs all over this city.
In a bid to stop the rooftops of Oxford becoming a magnet for schools of dismembered fish, Oxford Council insisted the shark had to go, but Bill fought them all the way.
It was a very complicated battle. It went from the council to the courts. I only won one time, and that was a time that mattered.
5 years after the shark's arrival, the matter was eventually passed all the way up to the then Home Secretary, Michael Heseltine.
Michael Heseltine gave the statement, "I cannot believe the purpose of the planning laws is to enforce boring, mediocre design." And he let the shark live.
It wasn't this left-leaning liberal city that gave him permission. It was right-wing backwoodsman Tories who gave him this permission.
So, thanks to an American abroad, a 25-foot synthetic shark, and Michael Heseltine, the skyline of Oxford was changed forever.
It's not my shark, but I know this is going to sound corny, but it's the people's shark.
Can you imagine having a house that was just a sightseeing object you're trying to live in? You know, imagine living in a house with that lot of rubbish stuck on your roof.
A year in the world of planning today is as rife with conflict as it ever has been. Beauty salon owner Syed Shah has now reached a crucial point in a battle with Central Bedfordshire Council over his super-sized bungalow conversion. They served him with a demolition order, claiming his extension more than triples the permitted 45% increase.
Yes, I've bent the rules. You know, I would class them as minor adjustments. This is the gym. There was a flat roof garage here before. It wasn't blending in with the house, so we actually improvised and built this. This is an addition. And we have done this without permission. These are the dormers. We were supposed to have these in the back, but I've put them in the front, just to give us a little bit more space.
Why anyone would simply continue to build something and to build and to build and to build and risk having to demolish at what must be an expensive project is completely beyond my comprehension.
The issue for the council is how much bigger Syed's extension is than the original bungalow. But he maintains he's only extended the original footprint by the permitted 45%. In fact, Syed is so sure he didn't break any planning rules, he's decided to fight the council's order to demolish and appeal to the UK's Central Planning Inspectorate.
It's quite rare for the inspector to come to a different conclusion to the council. I think in most cases we find that the council have usually got it right.
If the decision goes against me, then obviously there are other avenues that we need to explore. If we have to go to High Court, that's an avenue that's there, subject to legal advice. I will be taking that.
"5 weeks later, and the crucial planning inspectorate decision arrives. To everyone's amazement, apart from Syed, obviously, they find in his favour, overruling the local council. The demolition order has been quashed, and Syed can start ordering the sharks for his fish tank.
We're clear. You know, the inspectors cleared both the enforcement notice and granted us planning permission.
But the inspector's decision is like a red rag to a town planner.
It was so unexpected. I mean, one respects the planning inspectorate, but this decision, and these are my words, was perverse. We're going to appeal this.
15 years ago, Robert Fiddler built a majestic family home to be proud of when he constructed this mock Tudor castle in the heart of the Surrey Greenbelt, behind a wall of hay.
I think people assume that what I did must have been wrong. What I did was definitely a risk, but it wasn't unlawful. In fact, it was basically a loophole in the law.
Robert thought he could use this loophole, known as the 4-year rule, by building his home in secret and keeping it hidden whilst he and his family lived there for a further 4 years. But when he finally revealed his fortress to the world, not everyone was impressed with the visionary farmer's achievement.
A neighbour contacted the council about this building. The council responded very, very quickly to that and immediately put an enforcement order on it for it to be removed as a building built by deception in the green belt, therefore making it unlawful.
In 2007, the council gave Robert just 3 months to demolish, and that was that. Except it wasn't. He appealed. The appeal found in favour of the council, and that was that. But it wasn't. Robert then appealed to the High Court and lost. But it still wasn't over.
Mr. Fiddler then decided to go to the Court of Appeal. Again, the appeal judge dismissed Mr. Fiddler's appeal, and I believe he described it as a paradigm of deception. As a result of that and other cases, the 4-year rule has now been clarified, and that any building built under deliberate deception is completely exempt now from the 4-year rule.
With the 4-year rule now a dead end, Robert has one last hope. Recent legislation allowing certain buildings on greenbelt land if there's an agricultural need.
I believe that there's nothing wrong. I've broken no laws, and that's my home. After they said they didn't like the idea of us having a house here, we said, well, we have to live here to look after the cattle. So we put in an application to retain it. They refused it, so we've appealed the refusal.
Robert's latest application to try and save his house is based on what he says is his need to be on the land with his animals. But because it's on the greenbelt, the council are adamant he should not be given retrospective planning consent.
I don't know what's up with them. Obviously they don't like me, but I've never done anything to hurt them.
An inquiry is being convened to break this latest stalemate. Chaired by a government inspector, it will determine whether Robert gets to keep his castle or if the council can raze it to the ground. The findings of the inquiry won't be known for several weeks.
We haven't got anything to hide, you know. All we want to do is get on with our lives, look after our animals and have a house where we can see what's going on. We're just praying that the inspector makes the right decision.
For me, it's just a load of stress. I mean, I'm not a young man, and I've been fighting this for... Well, we've been living in the house for 13 years, and I just want to get on with my life. This is our family home.
In Barton-le-Clay, Bedfordshire, Syed Shah's house has been spared after the government's planning inspectorate overturned a demolition notice issued by his local council. His story is once again headline news in the area.
Central Bedfordshire Council says it's not planning to challenge the planning inspector's decision.
I've always had faith in God, and once again, justice has prevailed.
But Syed's celebrations are cut short by a dramatic change of heart from the man at the council.
Driving home and just looking up at the skyline, I thought, well, nobody who was in possession of the facts could possibly agree that that was a minor extension to a flat roof bungalow. We're going to appeal this.
Appealing a decision by the all-powerful planning inspectorate is a serious business. It can cost thousands of pounds of public money to get the case before a High Court judge.
Some cases, councils will explore a little weakness in a decision. So you get this area of uncertainty introduced by the council spotting the weakness.
And with the inspectorate standing firm by their decision, Syed is now left a mere spectator in a battle between two administrative heavyweights, slugging it out over his bungalow extension.
You gave a statement to the press to say that we're not challenging the decision, yet 2 days later you challenged the decision.
As Syed's battle rages on, things are about to reach a devastating conclusion in Rodney and Pam's fight to save their Norfolk home.
A stroke of a pen, they can destroy a man's life.
Each year, there are thousands of disputes between individual homeowners and the planning authorities. For some, the results can be catastrophic. In West Norfolk, the home of pensioners Rodney Wilson and Pam Wen has been under threat of demolition since 2006 because, according to planning bosses, it's 19 inches too wide. Their plight has become big news in East Anglia, and local TV reporter Matthew Hudson has been following their story closely.
This should be a dream retirement home for 72-year-old Rodney Wilson and his partner. Instead, it's become a waking nightmare. And at the moment, he's waking up every morning wondering if today will be the day when the council comes and quite legally knocks down his property. Both Rodney and Pam struck me as people who were dealing with a situation that I don't think they really fully understood. We were there for the whole day. We spoke to as many people as we could. We didn't find a single local person who had any problem with it at all.
Rodney and Pam's neighbours, Lila and Greg Belosco, have lived next door since 2007.
It's an absolute delight, and when you walk past, you see beautifully manicured lawns. It's like a show home, and it looks as if it should just be there.
But this house is about more than just keeping up appearances. As doting grandparents, Rodney and Pam's biggest worry is losing what is a real family home.
We've got photographs and memories of the years we were here. And
birthday parties. It's just nice to have the family round us and have them weekends, spend the weekends home. And when you get to our age, every week is precious because you don't know whether you're going to be here the next week.
You don't know whether you're going to be here.
After almost a decade of applications, refusals and appeals, there's a massive amount of paperwork. For Rodney, this in itself is a huge obstacle.
If you can read and write, you're near the brain of Britain. You've got to put up with over 3,500 pieces of paper in 9 years. But as for me, I can't read and write, so you can imagine how demoralising this is. All they do is send me paper after paper after paper. If my home gets demolished, I can then go and get rented accommodation off the council where the taxpayer have got to pay me to live. And at the moment, they don't have to pay me anything because I live in my own home. I just want to live here.
Two months later, after nearly 10 years living on the land, Rodney and Pam lose their battle.
A 9-year row about planning permission was brought to a dramatic conclusion today as the Norfolk Council sent in a team to demolish a mobile home.
They never even told us they were coming in, and they just turned up.
The first I knew, I went out the back door of my home and my wife shouted, "You better get out the front." And when I ran out the front, there were vans, gave me this piece of paper, said, "This is going to happen today."
Just before 9 o'clock this morning, the demolition team arrived without warning.
Woken up this morning with all this lot in my drive. No notice or nothing. Nothing at all.
Pat and her partner Rodney were told in February that their home in Woolsoken near Wisbeach would have to go because it broke the terms of their planning permission.
The letter of the law was on the council's side. I do appreciate that. But given the ages of Rodney and Pam, I'm struggling to see how it was necessary to follow through with its threat to destroy the property.
I think they've actually acted in a draconian, barbaric way. You know, it wasn't as if the slide over bill was affecting anybody.
You can't put it into words. You really can't. You can't put it into words. What they're just destroying your life just for the sake of a brownie point, really.
They got no respect. It just as well have been a dog's kennel. They weren't people, they were animals.
The council didn't want to be interviewed about Rodney's case, but in their statement they said, "It is important people have confidence in the planning system and that it is applied fairly and consistently to all groups in society." The council had given Mr. Wilson and Mrs. Wen every opportunity to remove this dwelling over a 9-year period. It seems there was little or no intention of ever removing this structure. The council had no choice but to ensure compliance through direct action as a last resort. 3 weeks after the demolition, Rodney and Pam are still living on the site they own, but in a borrowed and much smaller mobile home.
This is the thing what grieves me most. My father gave me that. There is no price on that, and that's broke.
What remains of Rodney and Pam's retirement home has been removed from their land and now sits 2 miles away in storage.
This is where my conservatory has been thrown. That's my £8,000 conservatory. This is the heartbreaking thing about it. Me and my grandchildren spent hours in this room, and this is what they've done with it. A stroke of a pen, they can destroy a man's life. A stroke of a pen. When we wake up every morning, we have to look out to see what's left of our home. It's devastating, absolutely devastating. She won't stop now.
Right.
They've ruined her life, ruined her home. For what? So I hope they're very, very happy.
Back in Bedfordshire, Syed Shah's local council are due in court to contest the planning inspectorate's controversial approval of his bungalow extension. But on the day before the hearing, the government inspectorate suddenly has a dramatic change of heart.
We say we don't think we've got a defensible case in court. We think the inspector made a mistake. We will then appoint a new inspector after that to go off and have another look at the appeal.
We had decided on a course of action, which is always risky, and we were right.
It seems Councillor Young's determined stance has paid off.
It was one of those air-punching moments.
But Syed once again faces the very real prospect of seeing his dream home demolished.
My family are devastated again. How is this possible?
Syed will now have to go through the whole appeal process with the planning inspectorate again, and only then will he know whether he can keep his house.
Hopefully, the new inspector will see, as the old inspector saw, for the property for what it is. It is an extension.
When the case is heard again, if they do not grant permission, then Mr. Shah will have to return the building to that which he has planning permission for. But if Mr. Shah refuses to work with us, ultimately we will have to order Mr. Shah to demolish the house, and that will be at his cost.
I'm confident the decision will be in my favour again. As I say, the council have been incompetent all the way through this whole saga.
After 3 years, Syed is no closer to knowing if he can keep his dream home. A new inspector is to be appointed this summer. It's been 10 weeks since the crucial hearing to decide the fate of Robert Fiddler's castle home in Surrey. With a family on tenterhooks, there's an ominous arrival in the post.
I've been really keyed up the last week or so, thinking that we must be going to get a decision any day at all. And then we get this letter, and I really can't quite understand what they're trying to say. It's come from the Secretary of State, somebody called Pickles, I think, Eric Pickles. And what it says is, the Secretary of State now considers that he should determine the appeal himself. To be honest, it makes you a little bit dubious as to what's in their mind. And I don't think that this would have arisen unless the inspector found in our favour.
So the fate of the castle now hangs on the decision of the Secretary of State. 2 months later, and they get the letter they've been waiting for. But what at first glance looks to be a victory and a 3-year reprieve from the inspectorate has in fact been overruled by Mr. Pickles.
Got this wonderful bit of news that, first of all, we'd won our appeal, followed up by the Secretary of State saying that he'd overruled the decision.
Eric Pickles rejected the appeal because he said Robert's castle would set a dangerous precedent for building within the Greenbelt.
They obviously just don't want us to have the house. We're little people and they're big people and they can do what they like.
We've really come to the conclusion that even if we appealed, which we can do legitimately, it would be a waste of time. You're appealing, as Linda says, against big people who don't have any time for small people.
After years battling the planners, Robert has been ordered to tear down his castle.
Now the decision has been posted, the injunction comes into force, which gives Mr. Fiddler 90 days in which to demolish the property.
They're telling me now that if I don't remove my lovely house within 90 days, that they could put me in prison. Nice, isn't it?
Despite everything he's been through, Robert remains philosophical about his experience.
We've had a wonderful 14 years of living in a wonderful house, and we're not done yet.
Building his home and then fighting to save it has cost Rodney over £260,000. The council have now also sent him the bill for the demolition, totalling £40,000. Their entire life savings may be gone, but Rodney still isn't giving up hope.
We're going to stay in here, and I will apply for planning again, and hopefully we can go down that road.
We're staying on the land because it's all we've got left. They've took everything, and if we move off of here, then we feel we have literally lost everything we've worked our life for.
I'm going to die on this land, and that'll be the end of story. Whether it's in my caravan, whether it's in my mobile, or whether it's in my shed out the side. But I'm going to die on this land, one way or the other.
Next time, one man's fight for his home could cost him everything he holds dear.
I don't know if we split up as a family. I don't know.
A dream home build in a leafy Bolton suburb goes out of control.
It's been a complete dog's dinner.
Just about everything about this building was wrong.
And an entire community's home from home comes under threat.
If the council think they're going to take it down, they've got another thing coming.